What is going on, motherfuckers? We are back. I haven't done a YouTube video in a fucking minute. So, it is July 26th, Saturday night. I'm a fucking loser because I'm in front of my monitor making a YouTube video. But, we'll see. We'll see where that takes me in a couple years. So, I'm going to talk to you guys about technicals, alright? Specifically, a new tool, a new part of my strategy that I've unlocked that is getting me crazy fucking gains and made me go absolutely dummy this week. Mostly the second half of this week. The first 2 days I didn't trade. So, if you are familiar with the Discord, the channel, anything in general, recently, my main strategy has been liquidity, inverse fair value gaps. I've always entered off inverse fair value gaps since switching to ICT almost a year ago. I've almost always entered off fair value gaps, inverse fair value gaps. But there are a couple ways that I can identify which ones are the highest probability, all right? So first, let's talk about inverse fair value gap entries. You don't just take any inverse fair value gap that you see, right? Like, for example, this is technically an inverse fair value gap right here, right? And it works. It works beautifully, right? But would I take it? Probably not. We're not sweeping any significant liquidity. We have a 1 minute low and stuff like that. Maybe if there was an SMT here. But that's just not how I like to trade inverse fair value gaps. You look at let's check out when that failed, This one, for example, let's say you're targeting the high after this inverse fair value gap. You get the trade, you miss the high, and then you get stopped out. Not every inverse fair value gap is going to work, and not every single one is going to print you straight towards the next pool of liquidity. So how do I identify ones that work? Well, the biggest thing that all profitable ICT traders are typically going to use, especially the ones who trade like me, like quick scalps, quick moves, is higher time frame bias or confirmation. What that means is I'm looking for one of two things, and then now there's a third that I'm going to get into in a second. Liquidity sweeps and fair value gap respects. Meaning, are we sweeping something on either the hourly, the 4 hour, or the daily? Are we sweeping a session liquidity? So what that means is kill zones are split up into different time zones, and I use this indicator, ICT kill zones and pivots, to point out all of the sessions and their time frames, right? So there's Asia session highs and lows, there's London highs and lows, New York AM, lunch, PM highs and lows. So if we are sweeping either a session high or low, an hourly high or low, 4 hour, daily, data wick, if those come out using Forex Factory, you could find a red folder, and if there's a red folder that creates a big wick, 50 plus points, there's going to be a high and a low. You could sweep one of them and target the other. So I'm always looking for pools of liquidity like those highs and lows that I just said. I'm also looking for, is a higher time frame for value gap getting respected? So I'm going to show you guys the trade that I took this morning on stream, alerted it on stream because I am the GOAT, and here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to break it down. So this morning, right at open. Open was this candle right here. So what do you immediately notice on the hourly time frame? We swept an hourly low. This was the New York lunch low from the day prior, Thursday. So as soon as we open right here, we come down and we sweep this hourly low. Then you could look, all right, do we have a fair value gap somewhere? It's okay if we don't, but we would prefer to. Yes, we do. So we have our higher time frame clearly pinned out. We're bouncing off of this 4 hour. There might even have been a daily, but we'll just use this 4 hour, right? So you don't need to have both a fair value gap and a liquidity sweep on higher time frame to get a setup, but obviously the more confluence is the better. But you want either a fair value gap respect or a liquidity sweep. I personally don't like taking trades if there's not at least a liquidity sweep. I value liquidity sweeps more than fair value gap respects on the higher time frame. So I'm basically never going to take a trade if there's not at least some sort of valuable liquidity getting swept beforehand that is proving the reversal to be powerful. So now, it's pretty obvious which fair value gap I took. I always like to go for the lower time frame. So 30 second, 1 minute, 2 minute, I'm usually going to look for those fair value gaps. How do I know which fair value gap to take as an inverse? Well, it comes down to a couple things. It comes down to size and placement. So I usually want it to be a singular fair value gap. That's what I mean by placement. If there's 3 30-second fair value gaps stacked on top of each other, I'm not going to want to wait for all three to inverse, and I'm definitely not going to just enter after the first one inverses because there's 2 fair value gaps above it. I want to go in a time frame there where there's one singular fair value gap, and it's a nice size. This one was 12 points. It's a great size. You want it to be anywhere from 8 to 15 points, sometimes 20, but I don't like it when it gets that big. Pause. And if your gap is like 3 points, like, if you have this little, I don't know, let's see, this gap right here from pre-market, this shit is a fucking point. It's very invaluable to me. Like, that's not an imbalance that I think is that effective, and I don't think the market is really going to give a fuck. So, I entered this long, stop loss below the fair value gap, and I targeted 1-to-1. I just went for this high, you know what I mean? So it was about 15-point stop, 15-point TP. Boom, got hit instantly. The Discord banked, and we were done for the day at 9:48 a.m. because I am goated. So here's the thing. This is what I always trade, right? But there's one thing that I'm going to add now to my sauce to make this shit even more legendary, all right? And that, my friends, is called a why am I on the wrong fucking day? That, my friends, is called a rejection block. Now, there's a YouTuber out there called Powell, and he's been blowing up in the last couple months. And he opened up and he made these two videos. He made the PD array that makes me 6 figures per month, where he discusses rejection blocks, and then he structured an entry, how to enter with them. I back tested entries off rejection blocks, but I'm always gonna love my iFVG's more. I just think they're very, very nice. You know what I mean? So here's the thing. A rejection block is when you sweep some sort of liquidity and then you make a big wick while reversing to the opposite side. Here's what I mean by that. This is a low, right? This is liquidity right here. This is liquidity right here. It's a swing low. I'd rather use this as an example, but this is also a session low, so either works. We came down and we swept this, and right after sweeping it on the hourly, we also made this big ass wick, which means that we came down and respected it, but then faked out and reversed. This is what's called the rejection block, and according to Powell, you want it to sweep liquidity, make a huge wick, and then the candle closes the opposite direction. What I mean by that is, if you're coming down and taking out a low, it's a bearish candle, right? We want the candle to flip bullish in this scenario, which this green one right here did. We swept liquidity, we came down under it, made a big ass wick, and then came up and closed green, meaning that we're rejecting the area. We're making this rejection block. And now anything in this wick is technically part of that rejection block. And what I've noticed is the reactions that we get off these rejection blocks are extremely effective. Like I said, you can look for 1-minute rejection blocks if you want. Not really my cup of tea. I like the inverses better. But fuck me, is this a powerful confluence to have, bro. Add your rejection blocks. Here's 2 time frames that I use the rejection blocks on. 5-minute and 1 hour. I don't really look anywhere else. Maybe if there's a 4-hour, I'll try it. But they give such immediate reactions that I want to see us tap into it once. I don't want to see us just keep on respecting a rejection block, because eventually it's going to get rejected, right? Or it's going to get disrespected. I want us to form a fucking order block, and I want us to very, very quickly go into it. As you can see, we formed this order block, and we tapped into it pre-market, which wasn't great, but we didn't make much of a move up. We didn't take out this liquidity. We didn't inverse this small fair value gap on hourly. We didn't make a crazy move. Finally, we had the volatility when New York AM opens. There's all the volume coming in, all those orders. So finally, we had the volatility and the volume to take a trade off the rejection block. So my normal strategy, I'm looking at higher time frame liquidity sweeps and higher time frame fair value gaps getting respected. And of course, my entry model is always going to be those lower time frame inverses. But if you add a 5-minute or an hourly rejection block, like I just said, that just makes that shit so much more powerful. In July, I've lost maybe 5 times, 6 times, something like that. I don't really know. I back tested, and if I only took trades off the rejection blocks, with all my criteria plus rejection blocks, I lost once. Now, am I making it a requirement to enter? No, because you do end up missing out on a lot of moves, ones that do work and ones that don't work. I would rather be consistent with my strategy, so I'm still going to take trades even if there isn't a rejection block. But if there is a rejection block on the 5-minute or the hourly that's overlapping with my higher time frame bias, and I'm getting a reaction out of it with a lower time frame inverse entry, then goddamn am I going to be more excited and more confident in that trade. And that's just another thing to really think about when you're taking trades, especially if you're using my strategy or a strategy similar, like an inverse fair value gap strategy. If you're taking trades, if you're a day trader, you're almost always going to need that higher time frame bias, and using rejection blocks as a key confluence to add to your list is so goddamn effective, and I love it, and they're working really well for me. Like I said, not a requirement to enter yet, just because of how many entries you could miss, so many moves you could miss, and I like to be consistent with my strategy, but it is something to look out for. If you're about to enter a trade on the inverse and you're getting, a liquidity sweep and an inverse, check if there's a rejection block, and we'll see how well that helps, and see if more of those trades hit than not. All right, have a good one, guys. Glad I could break down this trade from Friday. We ate the fucking Discord 8. My Instagram is in bio. Check out our Instagram, and we have a Discord link in our Instagram bio. And make sure you check that shit out. Join. There's a free community and a paid community. We do live streams every single day for paid community, and we do 1 to 2 live streams a week for free community. So make sure you check it out. We're also teaching our strategy. We offer one-on-one mentorship, free for premium members, and $25 for 30 minutes, $50 for an hour for free members. So have a good one, guys. This is the sauce. Let's fucking get after it next week.